Welcome to Nursing Life 101, the most important nursing class you never got to take in nursing school. We will be traversing different objectives like interviewing, what to do in nursing school, boundaries, burnout, and so much more. If this interests you, I hope you are taking good notes because class is now in session.
Hello, and welcome to Nursing Life 101. We're so excited to have you here with us as we dive into the world of nursing, sharing our experiences, insights, and a little bit of fun along the way. I'm Colby, and I couldn't be happier to introduce my co-host.
What's up, guys? My name's Christopher. Together, we'll be bringing you real stories, practical tips, and discussions about all things nursing. Whether you're a fellow nurse or just curious about the life behind the scrubs, we're thrilled to have you join us.
All right, so today's topic
is an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships between PCTs, CNAs, and nurses.
And nurses, yeah. So, to start, a PCT or a CNA are basically the same thing with a few nuances,
right.
But what you could summarize it is your nursing assistant. Yeah. So depending on the hospital or certification, they have a range of skills that are within their scope of practice, but generally they're there as the nurse's assistant to the patient.
Mm-hmm. And really and truly, they probably see a patient a lot more than a nurse does because they're the ones that do a lot of the bathing, a lot of the toileting, the feeding.
Mm-hmm.
All those various things that nurses tend to not have as much time to be able to do because we have other things that we have to prioritize.
Yes. So basically anything that nurses can delegate to below them. Not below them isn't really a good term, but as far as degree, I guess, is what a nurse's aide or assistant or tech will do.
Yep. What would you say, or what do you think PCTs say about you?
Oh, I think
to your face, and then I guess behind your back.
Okay. I think generally I have really good relationships with my techs.
Mm-hmm.
Nurses, aides, whatever, what have you. But I also feel like that's because they respect me in the sense of if I need help, I'm gonna ask them to help me. But if I'm not busy, I'm going to do the things that technically are in the scope of their practice.
Right.
For instance, if a patient rings and they want a cup of ice and I'm not doing anything, I'm going to bring them a cup of ice. I'm not going to say, okay, we'll send your tech in, and then go look for the tech and say, can you bring them a cup of ice, and then continue on talking or whatever.
Yeah. And that's interesting because that leads on to various things on how do you think in terms of gaining that respect? For example, you as a nurse, you can't, when you're new, you can't just say yes to all of it. You can't.
Yeah. You got to find a balance.
Right. But how do you gain that respect? Because you want to say, yes, I'm there and available.
Yeah.
But you can't just.
I think it's really important to establish a good rapport in the beginning of your shift. I mean, generally, unless you're in a float pool situation, you're going to be working with these staff members pretty consistently.
True.
And you want to grow healthy and good working relationships with all of your coworkers. I like to get rapport, and then I go find my tech and say hey, here's what I've got for these patients today. I'm going to do this and this, and at this time I'm going to need like help with this point, or like, try to come up with a game plan together.
Yeah.
I think, that's going to build a trusting working relationship. You've established like from the beginning of your shift, like this is the help that I know I'm going to need right now, like what this patient's going to need today from both of us, or like maybe you could take this for me and blah blah blah. I think probably behind my back, I think
Oh.
I think it's probably much of the same. I think you cultivate these relationships. I think I don't know. I feel like my as a charge nurse, like my nurses and my techs know that like I try to make everything very as fair as possible.
Yeah.
And I am very equitable when it comes to like assignment making. So like when I'm on the floor and I'm taking care of patients, I'm very equitable in like the amount of work that I'm asking for them to do.
Right.
I'm taking on, an equal responsibility as well.
Right.
So I hope that like even behind my back that's my reputation. Is it might not be fun, but it's fair. I want I want them to feel like I check in and be like, hey, how you doing? Can I help you with anything? I want to make sure that they get their break, like that sort of thing. Even with like, I mean, we're talking about techs, but like sometimes our techs end up like sitting with a patient who's confused and needs a companion, and our staffing office can't provide one. Like,
right.
I have gone and sat and like covered their lunch break and sat with the patient, and then also traditionally, if we do get a companion, a lot of times the techs are asked to break the companion or like the one-to-one sitter. And instead of asking the tech to do that, I, as the nurse, is like, hey, I have 30 minutes. My other patients are all tucked away. I can cover this person's break so that you can continue helping the rest of the floor.
Right. Now, so what in those situations where you do kind of alleviate some of that pressure in terms of like workload, and that PCT just like sits and does nothing, how do you feel?
Oh, obviously that's frustrating.
Oh, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also don't let people get away with that. Like, I just don't. Like, if I'm busy and I'm busting my tail end to get things done, and I notice someone sitting on their phone at the nurse's station, like, I'll delegate. Like, the thing about me is that, like, as a new grad, you have to figure out the balance of, like, what you should delegate and what you shouldn't. And I do think there's a learning curve there for a lot of people. Myself included. I like to be in charge of everything and do as much as I can. So that's probably another reason why my techs like me, is because I do a lot of stuff, and they're like, and that's why.
Colby's got it.
Yeah, well, but like you said, that could become dangerous because then they just expect you to do things,
right?
And
then they get upset if you don't.
Yeah, but that's like a precedence that you've set. So like for me, this is a learning curve that I had to figure out, is like when I realize I can't do everything is to when you can delegate the things that are delegatable to the people who can do them. And if I see someone sitting in the nurse's station on their phone or chit-chatting, and I have like 3 sets of vitals I need to get, and someone needs to go to the bathroom, I'm going to delegate something. I'm going to be like, hey, I need you to go and do blah, 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 please. Thank you. Like, and here's a question for you, and I would love to know how you feel about this. There was conversation at some point about our health system. Somebody in I don't know where it was, but the conversation came about where it's like, you don't have to say please and thank you. It's their job. And I was like, you don't have to be rude either.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, I don't think that's a teamwork environment, but okay.
Yes, it is our job to do certain things, nurses included. But I've been reading 9.5 Things Disney, or 9.5 Things Disney does different than the hospital, or something like that. I can't think of the actual title at the very moment, but it talks about building a culture of teamwork and camaraderie, and that is not how you do it.
No.
That is not how you do it.
It's a quick way to set a fire.
torch the place down.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said when someone came back from one of those things and said that. I said, "Oh,
no,
don't use that language here.
No.
Because they're going to burn you. They're going to burn the whole place." Yeah. I mean, I'll say this. I've seen nurses do it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I've seen people do it the right way. And you will too. And if you think, and here's another sign, if the techs aren't nice to you,
ooh, you probably aren't doing it the right way.
You probably are not doing it the right way.
It's true.
That's a surefire sign.
100%.
But yeah, I mean, someone's listening to this and they're like, hate listening. And they're like, I hate Colby. And she's the worst. She's the worst nurse. She gives me a ton of just garbage to do.
Go ahead and write it down in the comments. Any type of comment is good for us.
No, I'm kidding. I'm really not terrible, honestly. I truly do still do like so much when I'm on the floor, and I won't ask for help unless I like really need it.
Yeah.
And like if there was something that we like, as far as like our techs and nursing assistants, like they do have specific tasks that they're supposed to do. Like on our unit, everyone gets morning vital signs at 8 a.m. and then either Q4 or Q8 from that point on. So like our techs do that. Our techs know that.
Right.
Our techs get blood sugars before meal times. That's something that they do. And then what is something else that they like automatically do? I mean, they'll help settle the patient for an admission. So they'll get the vital signs EKG like as an assistance to the nurse. Like they're both in there doing it.
Yeah.
Our techs we'll run the QCs on our blood glucose machines. Like, so there are some things that are just like automatically delegated and a part of their daily routine. Now, there are other things that like they do throughout the day that it's like a conversation with the nurse. Like I said at the beginning of the shift, like here's what I'm going to need help from you at this point. Like, this is what we're going to do together. This is what I'll do, that kind of thing. For example, like, when we're giving certain medications, like Tikacin or Sodalol, and it's a loading dose. Someone's come to the hospital, have this medication.
I haven't done that in a while. But okay, yeah.
Yeah. When someone comes to the hospital to do that, we give the medication, and then 2 hours after that medication is given, we need to get an EKG. Yeah. And so usually I'll have a conversation with my tech like immediately in the morning and say, hey, this patient is on Tikacin. I'm planning on giving the dose at 9. They'll be due for an EKG at 11. I'll let you know after I give the dose to confirm what time the EKG is done.
Right.
If for whatever reason, if you're tied up around then, just let me know. I'll go get the EKG. But like, if not, like, can you please? And so like, that's a conversation I like, let's plan our day together, you know?
It really and truly, so something that nursing school does not teach you is that, yes, they kind of give you a decent little like break of what non-licensed professional, I think NLP, non-licensed professional, I think that's what they usually refer to them as in terms of like NCLEX world. They give you kind of like a breakdown of what they can do, right? Yeah. But they don't teach you how to actually communicate to someone and delegate. That is something that, at least in my nursing school, was never actually taught. I mean, they say you should delegate, you should do this, but they never actually say what you should do. Yeah. And it really does. It starts out, as someone who was a CNA before becoming a nurse, I absolutely hated my nurses. Hated them because they didn't do anything. They just sat at the computer and charted. Take that for what you will, but there were, and in terms of CNAs in the nursing home that I used to work for, there were only really and truly 2 really good ones that would be helpful to me. Like I graduated high school and immediately started working as a CNA. Yes, I had a whole semester of like actual work, and I was working for that actual health system or that rehab facility. And I got to know the residents and the people. But this was like a big boy job for myself, and I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. So
Uh-huh.
like, it was those two like pillars of CNAs. Those two people. There was two older ladies. They had been there for years. They
Uh-huh.
knew what they were doing. They could tell you a resident back, forward, sideways,
Yeah.
all kinds of different ways. But it was those people that really drove me into, because like, honestly, legitimately, this just in, I was like, I'm not going into healthcare.
Yeah.
Like, even I knew I was going to be a doctor, and I was like, I don't even want to do that.
Yeah.
I'm
You
like, if
very
it's anything like this,
disillusioned
yeah,
very
if it's
quickly.
anything like this, mm-mm,
Yeah, I'm out.
yeah, I'm out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I really kind of honed in onto those two that I was like, okay, there is saving grace, and you're going to have to be that for other
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
right?
You have to like set the tone.
You do.
Yeah.
And so, bringing all that story back together to just one thing is that one thing that I absolutely noticed in terms of just the communication between the two CNAs, it was solid.
Yeah.
And they could talk to each other, and they could say things, and they got it. But then they could also just do things and just know that it would be done.
Uh-huh.
Like, it was just kind of that weird look. You've given people that, like, yo, don't talk to them
Mhm.
look, and it would be done. They did that, except with like actual tasks that CNAs did, and it was insane. They worked like a machine I've never seen. But
That's amazing.
yeah, it was really cool. But going back to, I'm making my way back, I promise, is that what Colby's saying in terms of delegating, it's all about communication,
Mm.
and it starts at 7:01.
Yeah.
It really does. And we're in a health system where both, I know our techs stagger our start time. Y'all don't.
Yeah. No. Our
Okay.
techs come in a half hour before our nurses.
Right. So that's a vital, and also this also shows your commitment to the tech work as well. Your license covers everything the tech does. So don't ever think that you are not allowed to do any of that stuff,
Mhm.
because you are trained to wipe butts, you are trained to feed, you are trained to walk people, you are trained to make sure they go to the bathroom. You are trained to do that. And so that 30-minute like staggered time is your ability to show the tech that you will do the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think, well, yes, I think that's so true. Our techs, while they're in report, like, if the call bell goes off, like like we call them hospital unit coordinators, but they're like the secretary. They know that like the techs are in report, and the nurse like will have to respond to this call bell, so they'll go to the nurse and say like, hey, this person needs this. So then like it's on the nurses to find a partner if it's a 2-person job, like
Right.
another nurse to go in and do it. Like, those techs are getting reports, so that way when the nurses go into report half an hour later, the techs are they're
Covering
the ones.
yours.
Yeah, exactly.
And really and truly, that like last 30 minutes is a good time for you to make sure that pain medicines are addressed,
Yeah.
making sure any other type of medicine is addressed, any, I like to call them my bleeding and not, or excuse me, not bleeding and shoot, what do I actually call it? Breathing and not bleeding rounds.
Breathing and not bleeding rounds.
Yes.
I like that. Yeah.
Because
In the last half hour.
yeah, like,
Because how many times have you finished a shift
oof,
and it's like 6:30, you go in to
Ugh.
do your last round, and it's automatically like, we call them met calls, but
Yes.
like a medical emergency
done.
team, like all the time at the end of shift, because
Yeah.
you haven't seen the patient. It's been busy the last 2 hours.
Yeah.
You go in, you're like doing your final check, and you're like,
Are
something's
you
wrong.
alive?
Yeah, something's wrong. Oh, stroke alert.
Done.
Oh, like blood pressure suddenly tanked.
Yep.
It's just the
Something.
luck of your end of shift that everything goes down the drain.
It all hits the fan.
Yeah.
Always. Just be prepared.
Just be prepared. But yeah, I think it goes back, like you said, to communication. If you're not talking about what your plans are and sharing that with each other, like, and also they're not your personal tech, that tech might have
Right.
4 other nurses that they're
Right.
helping out that day. Like, you may think like, oh, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to make this plan with them. And they're like, I can't do that because I've got this going on with this patient. Like, to have that conversation, that two-way street, and like, then you understand like what they have on their task list. And then you can see like, oh, okay, well, I can do this one, but if you can do the, like, you can trade off. It's like, it's just so vital, the communication, because otherwise, if you don't, then you're making an assumption that they're doing something, and then they made an assumption that you're doing it,
Right.
and then it doesn't get done. And at whose expense is that? The
Yours.
patient's.
Well,
that's a patient's expense,
okay.
but also yours,
it's also
because.
but it's your license it falls on.
Yes.
Like, this is your license. Yes, they do not have a license.
Right.
That's why they're non-licensed professionals. You delegate those things, and you assume that they have gone through the list of getting checked off, so you know that they're able to do it. So then you've got to circle back and ensure that it gets done.
Yeah.
But so nursing is like, you've got to communicate. Techs, and excuse me, nurses, you also know that they could have, depending on the health system, between 9 and 12 patients.
Or even more. I've worked on units where there's one tech and like 20 patients.
Yeah,
and technically they're all they're the tech for all those patients. Which obviously,
is wild.
Obviously on those, I won't say obviously, because every hospital is different. I'm sure there's some hospitals that just are not well, not splitting up workload very well. But I mean, that's an example of like how nurses took on workload. Like not that it's extra, but like, obviously if we don't have enough techs, then there will be more on our plates to do.
Right.
And when we had one tech at a hospital that was a traveler at, like, nurses would get the end of shift vitals and the start of shift vitals, and that was because that was when most common labs were due, and these techs also were phlebotomists. They didn't have a phlebotomy team.
Yeah.
So they got the middle of the night vital signs, and then we're there to help answer all the call bells, toiling, and everything with the nurses. But the vital signs in the morning and in the night, like the 2 other ones, were done by the nurses, and the weights were done by the nurses. So that way the tech could go around and get all the labs.
And see, that's the thing. That's the thing. Our health system is very cush.
Yeah. Oh, it's a very cushy place to work.
And you might be listening and you're like, man, they always have 2 techs, or at least have 2 techs, and plenty of nurses. Like, that happens. But we
often have one tech on my unit, at least, but we have a floor rule, or like a specialty rule, that they don't take more than 10 patients. So you could have one tech, but they're only taking 10 patients. So then that means the rest of them are technically, like, quote unquote, like, nurse covered as far as tech responsibility.
Right. And we try our best to respect that. And that's just something that I think overall is something that should be done.
Yeah.
But techs, when you hear that nurses only have 3 or 4 patients, or 5, who knows? It doesn't mean that we have more time.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I know it sounds like it. You're like, but take it from me, who has been a CNA and who had done 13, 14, 15 patients at a time. I get it. It makes no sense in your mind. But when I became a nurse, I was like, I feel like I'm taking care of 15, 16, 17 patients.
Yeah.
And it didn't change, though I actually did decrease in actual patient load.
Yeah.
And I would love to tell you that it's because, I don't know. Like, I can't even really start to kind of quantify what is the real reason behind why it's so heavy. I think
it's just different. It's just like fully different tasks.
It is.
Like, the reason why a non-licensed person can do the things that a tech can is because, like, not to, like, discriminate against a tech or a nurse's assistant, but, like, anybody can do those things.
Right.
What the responsibility of a nurse with each patient is it takes the degrees that we have to do it.
It
And
does.
it's just like the tasks that we do are way more involved.
Yeah. There's and it's not just physical. It's a lot more mental than what a tech does. And there's a lot of thinking and not theorizing, but
just it's like critical thinking.
Yeah.
Like, like they're like, oh, you're just giving meds. It's like, oh, I'm not just like scanning and handing them meds. Like I have to think like what this med is, what it's gonna do, how is it gonna affect the patient, what is their vital signs right now?
Right.
If I give this med, how is it gonna affect their vital signs? Like you have to think about that for each individual patient, for each individual medication. You have to look at lab work. Like we're as nurses, we have way more like critical thinking involved than we do in a tech role.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not to say that what the techs do is not vital. I mean, like you said earlier, a lot of times they may be spending more one-on-one time with the patient than the nurse gets to. And they might be the first person to recognize like, hey, their blood pressure at 8 o'clock this morning was 140/70. And now it's 80/40. Like that's a big change. Like they're the first one to see that. They're getting the vital signs. They're coming to the nurse and saying, hey, something's up.
Right.
That's important, like important work too.
It is. And that's why you are so important as a CNA, PCT, PCA, NA, all the
acronyms.
It's because you do have so much information that you can give a nurse that sometimes we as nurses are thinking about another patient and we just don't know.
Yeah.
So like when you see that a blood pressure has changed that drastically, you're probably going to be the one to see it and you've got to let us know.
Yeah.
If a patient doesn't pee within like 4 hours of the shift, like we want to know. Like these are important things.
Yeah, if you're getting a blood sugar before a meal and someone's 50, like
oh my god,
that's so important. Like for them to like let you know so that you can act fast. And some techs that have been around long enough know that 50 is critical, and they'll go get an orange juice and tell you on the way.
Right.
Like I'm grabbing an orange juice, 12 sugar's 50, and then like you're like, all right, I'm right behind you.
Right.
Like it is that. Having that assist, having that second pair of eyes, having that second pair of hands is so important. And it's so important for you to cultivate like good working relationships with your PCAs, PCTs, with your nursing assistants so that like it all comes back to the patient. Like you want to provide the best patient care, and working with this individual in a team in sync, like having a plan is how the best care is going to be delivered to the patient.
Yeah. And so, like, all of that involves all types of communication. But let's kind of bridge a little bit further into the delegation part. Like, we briefly kind of touched on it, but, like, how can you tell when is it too much and when is it not enough?
When is it too much and when is it not enough? We kind of talked about it a little bit when we said, like, when you're not delegating enough, when you're feeling frazzled and you're noticing, like, the text is chilling. That is like a very like baseline, like very easy way to tell. When you're delegating too much, like if you're not doing anything, there's no reason for you to not do a task.
Right.
That like if you were busy, you would delegate. Like that gets under my skin so bad. Like, okay, how about when I've seen this happen so many times and I've called people out on it. You walk out of a room.
And I believe that one, actually.
I've seen a nurse walk out of a room that she was.
God.
I'll just say they, because it could be a she or a he. But I've seen nurses walk out of a room that they were in for maybe 30 minutes, and then they go up to the tech and they're like, "Can you get their vital signs?" Why didn't you get the vital signs while you were in there? You were in there for 30 minutes. Why would you leave the room and then go ask them to get the vital signs? If you didn't have the Dynamap or the B450 or whatever kind of monitor you have to check the blood pressure, then you left the room anyways. You might as well just went and got it and go right back and get them real quick. Like, unless there's something that's like so crazy that you have to go to the next patient, you're like, hey, this is going on. Like, can you go back in there and get those vital signs for me real quick? I need to go check on this patient. Like,
Right.
unless there's like an extenuating circumstance, just get them while you're in
Yeah.
there.
And it's very rare that extenuating circumstance is actually happening.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why I'm saying that's when it's too much delegation.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a very fine line in that, because there are times where you're like, I see the PCT there, like they could easily do it when I have, timely meds that I still have to give. Like,
Yeah.
I get it, but like you said, you were in there for 30 minutes. The blood pressure cuff is automatic, so it runs by itself.
Yeah, it's not like you're doing a lot of heavy lifting for that.
So, like, and then your pulse ox is automatic, so you don't have to do much for. I mean, you can't do anything manual for the O2, but you don't have to count the pulse.
Yeah.
So
the only thing you have to count is respirations. Everything else is digital. Right. Tell you.
So like 5 minutes at most.
Yeah, it really shouldn't be that long.
It takes me a little longer, but it's been a while since.
Does not take you more than 5 minutes to get a set of vital signs. I think that's another thing, like why techs can take on more than a nurse, because the tasks that they do have can be done quickly.
Yeah.
Like, generally, it should not take more than 5 minutes to do vital signs.
No.
Maybe if you're having a lot of conversation, the patient asks you to go get a water in the middle of it, like that kind of thing, sure. But their tasks don't take as long. But
well, if you know anything about patient satisfaction scores, and one of the like major patient satisfaction companies for hospitals is Press Ganey.
Yes.
And one of the questions that is Press Ganey, and then another one is Gallup, GALLOP. One of the questions, actually both of them ask, is anticipating your patient's needs.
Yeah.
As nurses, I just remembered I always brought a cup of water.
Yeah, you pull your meds, you get a cup of water.
I got a cup of water.
I think so, and some of our techs that I've experienced, some of my techs are also like that. Like when they come through in the morning, well, it's tricky on my floor because we have heavy heart failure, so you have to make sure like fluid restrictions and that sort of thing. But like if there isn't a fluid restriction on a patient, like a lot of my techs are really good about just like getting a water, going and getting vital signs, getting a water, going and getting vital signs.
Right.
Like it just becomes like secondhand practice. Like you just gotta anticipate it. And also like toileting in advance. Being like, hey, while I'm here, do you need to go to the bathroom?
Yep.
Like that's another thing. Like if you're I hate that. Like you're as a nurse, they walk out and they're like, hey, this patient needs to go to the bathroom.
Ugh.
Okay, you were just there.
You were just there.
Walk them to the bathroom.
Please.
Like I just can't, like I can't wrap my head around that one, and I've seen people do it and I'm always like shocked every time. Like, what? And I think like it is in the scope of responsibility for a charge nurse to I don't want to say
this
call,
is interesting. Yeah, I mean,
I don't want to say call out, but like call out behaviors like that, and on both sides. Like a lot of times
you're maintaining a culture. You're not calling it out. You're just maintaining the culture.
Maintaining a positive, a positive work environment.
Right.
Like, and that's and to let nurses get away with that kind of behavior is not like going to provide you with a patient positive experience.
No.
Like that's
a patient positive experience or a employee or teammate positive experience.
Yeah,
because
either one.
I mean, I have to catch myself at times because I'm like, hey, can you do this because I need to go back to the office. I mean, I have an RN behind my name. I have not lost my license. I just renewed it this past year. Like, I still am able to do those things, and I have to remember that, sometimes I should do it. I mean, it's just...
Yeah. I think, and it, like I said, it goes both ways, too. Like, if you notice, like, there might be some beef between a tech and a nurse, and you're in that charge nurse role, you have to, a lot of times, like, try to resolve that between the two. Like, I hear you need to listen to both sides. You need to, say, like, hey, I hear what you're saying. This is, and then like try to get them to get on the same page, and then remind everybody that ultimately it's not about one or the other. It's about, again, I'm going to say it's about the patient, making sure that they get the care that they need. And I think a lot of times people take situations like this, it becomes, if it's a bad situation where like a nurse and a tech are beefing, it's a personal thing.
Yeah.
And then we need to remember to leave like we can handle personal things, but right now we have to get this work done for the patient. We need to put that to the side. Like when we walk through this door threshold into the patient room, it's about the patient.
It is.
And that should be our first priority.
What do you do when a PCT like shows favoritism? This is completely off
Yeah,
script.
this is off script.
Yeah.
What do you mean, like shows favoritism?
So I remember a particular tech on my floor when I was an actual nurse on the floor. I mean, would kind of like ensure that all the things were done for me, but I mean, like to a T, but was kind of
like whatever.
For everybody else.
I mean, again, like
I appreciated it.
You're like, thank you. I mean, I think that goes back to like you have a working relationship with that tech.
Yeah.
You know, like you, and not to say that that's the right thing, but it kind of just shows that like you're a better example of a nurse and what everyone else should strive to be. Like if they want to do, if that tech likes you so much that they did everything to a T, and then they were just kind of like blasé about everyone else, what's going on there? There's a bigger question, and that's more for management. But also, like in the moment, are you asking me like I'm a charge nurse or I'm one of the nurses that's getting neglected?
I'm saying charge nurse.
Okay. Well, I mean, either way, I mean, personally, but as charge, I mean, if I see it and it's blatant, I don't know. I feel like, here's the thing. I feel like a lot of times as charge, I might not notice something like that.
It's true.
Like as long as they're working and they're not just like, you know, I'm not going to notice that they did everything. Like,
right.
You know, and then like left some things to the side unless it gets brought to my attention. But let's say it does get brought to my attention. I mean, I have to address it. And that's like a critical and awkward conversation, but it has to be done. I mean, you want to just like say, hey, like what's going on? Like it's been brought to my attention that like you're not doing X, Y, and Z for these 3 nurses.
Right.
Like, did something happen? Like was there a conversation? Like you need to get to the bottom of it and figure it out. I mean, and then just go from there.
No, that's fair.
It's not a comfortable conversation, but when you're in a leadership role, you have to have uncomfortable conversations quite frequently, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm learning that very quickly, actually.
Yeah, it's not fun.
It's not fun at all. But I mean, another like excerpt from that book is that very much to your point, you can't just make a blanket statement at huddle. Yeah. You have to target that person. And it's not targeting in terms of like aggressive or mean or malicious. It's targeting to understand. Yeah. You know, it's like, hey,
I mean, it's just getting to the source.
Right.
Like if you know that it's not a blanket issue, why would you give a blanket statement?
Right. Yeah.
Like if it's not all of the techs doing something or all of the nurses doing something, why would you just say like, hey, everyone? Because one, that's going to create more animosity. Because I will say personally, when that does get done, because for some reason there is a leadership style like that where like something bad happened.
Well, it's because it's easier to do, and it
is, but it doesn't make you a good leader, and I'll say that.
No, that's
unless it's a consistent, I would say this, unless it's a consistent issue, unless it's a blanket problem.
Right.
Like if it's a blanket problem, then it warrants a blanket response.
Yeah.
If you know who's doing something, it needs to be directly like intervened.
Right. Yeah.
Like otherwise, what's the point? Because as someone who knows, like, I don't know why they're saying this right now. I did all of the A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3 tasks, and I do it every shift. And I do it every shift. Why are they saying this?
Right.
There's like probably 6 other people that have that same thought, and then they get angry. They're like, you know, I get upset. At least I'm like, I always do that. Why are they saying that? But really, they're talking to like 1 or 2 people. And you're like, just talk to those 2 people. That's got off tracks a little bit. But I just think like, yeah, if you know specifically that it's 1 or 2 people, you need to talk to those 1 or 2 people and figure out what's going on. Sometimes somebody just needs to be heard, or you hear what's going on. And you're like, oh, you're frustrated because of this, this, and this. Okay, let's see what we can do to mitigate and like fix the problem so that we can all get back on track.
Yeah. All right, it's time for pop quiz. In this segment, we're diving into 1 or 2 NCLEX style questions to test our knowledge and see how we stack up. Colby and I will each take a shot at answering the question, and then I'll break it down with the correct answer. We'll also chat about how realistic or sometimes unrealistic these questions can be in the real world. Let's see how we do.
Okay. I'll read the first question to you because this is kind of like in my wheelhouse. So I already knew the answer earlier. Okay.
Well, you say that. I do deal with kidneys.
You do, but like, come on.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This question was made for me.
Yeah, it was.
So I'm going to read it to you.
On accident.
It was really by happenstance. All right. Question number 1. A nurse is caring for a client. I hate that they use client now, by the way. Sidebar. Yeah, I hate that. They're patients. Come on.
So okay, I'm going to continue on this sidebar. Interestingly enough, the reason why Walt Disney calls their
Patreon.
Yeah, the people that come to they call them guests. They like
because they're guests in their amusement park.
Yeah, but like it's all about patient satisfaction.
I know, and that I feel like I get it, but also there needs to be a line of like patient satisfaction, but also like let's remind you that you're sick and we're providing life-saving care.
Okay, that's okay.
There's like I feel like there's a fine line.
Client doesn't work like that?
Because they need to be reminded that they're a patient. I'm not working for them. Like it's a different mindset. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Like if I have a client, like I'm working for them, I'm investing their money, I'm doing blah blah blah. Yeah. I'm saving your life. And it's a little bit more.
It's a little bit different than
working for you. I'm working for you. I'm working to keep you alive.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is way off topic, but I would love for you to keep this actually in the podcast.
Okay.
Okay. Anyways, don't edit that out.
I won't.
Back to the segment break. Question number 1. A nurse is caring for a client with heart failure who has been prescribed furosemide, also known as Lasix. Which of the following assessment findings should the nurse report to the healthcare provider immediately? A. A blood pressure of 102/68. B. Potassium level of 2.8. C. Urine output of 250 milliliters over 8 hours. Or D. Heart rate of 82 beats per minute.
So, I mean, blood pressure, it's okay. It's, you know, it's
for
fine.
A heart failure patient, sounds about right.
Like, luckily, I have delved into your world before.
Yeah.
Urine output is fine. And then the heart rate is good.
Super solid.
I'm not worried about Lasix dropping any type of heart rate anytime soon.
Right.
So, I mean, I think I'm going to go with B, potassium level of 2.8 because of it being low, and Lasix lowers potassium.
Yes. Yep.
Look at me.
B, potassium level of 2.8 is the correct answer. So for anyone that's not familiar with diuretics, there's a few different kinds, but furosemide or Lasix is actually a loop diuretic, and that causes the body to lose potassium. A potassium level of 2.8 is critically low. Normal range is 3.5 to 5, but in our world, we really like to see our potassium, like in cardiology, we really love to see potassium at least 4.
Yeah.
So whenever it drops below 4, our providers are ordering like potassium repletion. When the potassium does get low, it has a higher chance of causing lethal rhythms. Lethal cardiac arrhythmia. So we want to keep those potassiums within a good normal range.
You be dead.
Because we don't want to have to save your life.
We want to stop you before.
Right. And then when Christopher went through all the other options and why they weren't the right answer, those are all legitimate. Blood pressure's fine. The urine output was fine. And the heart rate was absolutely normal.
And so, interestingly enough, when I learned in nursing school, potassium is a wimp. It is a wimp of an electrolyte. It moves the fastest away.
Yeah.
It does all kinds of stuff weird to the body.
Yeah.
It's just a wimp.
Yeah, potassium sucks.
It does. And it's the biggest dang pill to actually use.
Oh my god, they're like horse pills.
Yeah, they're massive.
Patients hate them, and
you
then
can't cut them.
You can't cut them because they're like enteric coated. You can't smush them up. The big white
Smush
ones,
'em up.
you can't squish them
Can't
up.
crush them.
Yeah, that's what I
Can't
meant.
smush them up.
Yeah, and then the powders taste disgusting,
Terrible.
and then the IV version burns the shit out of your veins.
It does.
So potassium's not fun to replete. It's not
good.
fun to lose.
No.
It's not fun to mess with. It's also not fun when it's elevated. Like if you're above 5, we have to do like hyperkalemia protocols to get it back down.
Yeah.
It's just potassium's a rascal.
It's a rascal. It's the one that's easily hemolyzed. It's just a rascal.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, a nurse is caring for a client with type 1 diabetes who reports nausea and abdominal pain. The client's blood glucose level is 350 milligrams per deciliter, and ketones are present in the urine. Which of the following interventions should the nurse perform first? A. Administer regular insulin intravenously. B. Start an IV infusion of normal saline. C. Administer an antiemetic as prescribed. Or D. Notify the healthcare provider.
Okay, so this is a classic NCLEX question. Situation where you're like, there's multiple right answers here.
Yes.
And the first time we went through this question, I said D, notify the healthcare provider, because I was like, yeah, I think we're going to do that first. But
so, unfortunately,
that's not the right
that
answer.
is not the right answer. It's actually starting an IV infusion of normal saline. And here's why. The client is exhibiting signs of diabetic ketoacidosis, also known as DKA, a life-threatening condition characterized by hyperglycemia, ketonuria, and dehydration. So rehydration with normal saline is the priority intervention to restore circulating blood volume and improve perfusion. Once rehydration has begun, other interventions can follow. With a wonderful key NCLEX tip, in DKA, always prioritize your ABCs, your airway, breathing, and circulation. I'm sure you've heard it many of times in nursing school. So those principles. Rehydration addresses the critical issue of circulation and takes precedence over other interventions.
Yes. So that is like I said, a classic NCLEX question where it's
Right.
like very easy to get caught up, and I fell in the trap because I go straight to like my actual practice brain where I'm
Right.
like, well, I wouldn't just, while I know starting normal saline makes sense and I can anticipate that the doctor would do that, if I'm suspicious of DKA, I'm going to page the doctor first. What I thought that the answer was going to be, my second guess was like, administer the antiemetic as prescribed, because they said that they were nauseous and there's already an order for it. So with the answer actually being the saline, I was kind of surprised because it didn't say that there was already like a standing order for it or something. So it's just a tricky NCLEX question, classic, exactly what you'll see in the actual board test.
Yeah.
Like you're going to run into those ones where you're like, oh, there's multiple things right here. You have to figure out which one's the most right. So while I knew instantly the answer to the first one without even having to like take a second to think about it, the second one, even after 10 years of experience, NCLEX style question got me tripped up.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like in nursing world, and you're in nursing school, you're taught the SBAR, right? Situation. So here's the situation. The situation is there's type 1 diabetes patient who reports nausea and abdominal pain, has a glucose of 350. Ketones are present in the urine. Background, it's probably the type 1 diabetes part.
Mm-hmm.
Assessment, it is the ketones in the urine part.
Mm-hmm.
And the recommendation is the starting the IV of normal saline. Yeah. So you're notifying the healthcare provider. That's what we do in the actual health system.
Yeah.
And it's so unfortunate because I mean, I somewhat guessed my answer when. I did. I was
Christopher got it right immediately, and I was like, oh,
that's probably
right. I was like, it is DKA, but yeah.
But that's the thing. You kind of have to think about what the patient is actually going through. But you do this on a daily basis.
Yeah,
you do it, and you would not start IV fluids before notifying the provider.
Mm.
You won't. The only time you'll do it maybe is if you're in the ICU. Bless you.
Excuse me. Ooh, sorry.
Maybe. And even then it's
Yeah.
dicey.
I mean, usually when you're in the ICU, your providers are right there, so
Yeah.
you're just kind of being like working together.
Popping your head in. We're doing. I moved my face away from the mic. I don't know if y'all heard me. Pop your head in. It was like, hey, I'm just doing this. Is that okay?
Yeah. And they're like, oh yeah. I'm putting the order in right now. So
Right.
like you're working simultaneously in the ICUs. But
Cool. Well, great job. If you feel like you would want to hear more NCLEX questions, just let us know. And also, if you thought these were pretty tough and are terrified of the NCLEX now, it's okay.
yeah,
You
don't
have
worry.
time, and you might not ever get this question.
Yeah, or maybe you just passed your boards and you're like, oh, listen to this question that I got that is going to haunt me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And then I looked it up after I walked out of the test. Like,
do you have one?
No, I don't.
either. It's been
Honestly,
too
that
long
was
for
such a
me.
traumatic experience. I literally blacked out.
Okay.
So
Wow.
I passed, but I blacked out.
That's good. I'm glad.
But if there are any that haunted you, and you want us to if you want to share, let us know. Do you have any that haunt you?
No, I don't remember.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people's shared experience would be like, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But if there is one, share it with us.
I remember the drive home.
I don't.
Wow.
It was such a long time ago. That's why I want to go back to journaling, so I don't have a good memory for small things like that.
Oh, that's fair.
I remember afterwards I was walking around a mall. I was on the phone with my mom, and I was like, I don't know what just happened. I was like, I'm shocked. I'm in
What
shock.
freight train hit me?
Oh, God.
Do you feel a good relationship can drastically change your shift?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely think, like, the difference between working with a tech that normally works on my floor and working with a tech who got floated to my floor, definitely two different experiences.
Yeah.
Like when I'm working with people that I have known for a while and I have a good relationship with, like someone you can not that you can't share a laugh or joke around with someone you don't know. Like you can, but some people are very serious, and it's the difference between like making it through your shift and being like, all right, it was fine, it was a good shift, I survived, we all survived, and then like having a good time and like cutting it up with your friends and like getting the work done, but also being like, I'm wiping poop from this person while they're holding the leg, and like we're just like making eyes. Like sometimes you can like do that silent giggle, like I cannot believe that just happened, or like it's like different when you're working with your friends versus working with like someone you don't know, but they're a colleague, whatever.
Yeah. No, for sure. And you talked about how there are times where nurses do not have tech coverage. What does it make you feel in terms of having techs when you don't have tech coverage? It's kind of a different question than what's actually written down.
Yeah, so my brain kind of like skipped though. So like you're asking like when we have techs but they're not covered for all your patients.
Right.
How does it feel like when I mean, listen, I think if you're working well as a team, even if the tech isn't assigned to your patient and you have a good relationship and like everyone's tied up and the tech happens to be sitting there, like if you have a good relationship, be like, hey, can you just help me turn this patient real quick?
Yeah.
Like it's not going to be a big deal or a big ask. You can ask anybody that, you don't have to ask like the tech. Obviously, if they're not assigned, you don't have to ask them. You can. It shouldn't be a big deal to help turn. But everybody that works on the floor, it should, like, we used to have this saying on our unit. We don't use it quite often, but it's just kind of like a culture of like, it's all 28. And 28 was the amount of patients that we had on our floor. So all 28. Like, it's not, oh, I have 4 patients and I'm not going to help you. Or I have, or I'm a tech and I have these 10 and I'm not helping you with the rest. Like, we're here for all of them. And like, if I'm free, I'm going to help you. So it's like never fun when you're short staffed. It's never going to be like the best day you've ever had. But because that's just not going to happen. No, like there's going to be a point in the shift where like You're like, Jesus, I can't be in 6 places at once.
Right.
Like, give me a break. But if you're working with good people and everybody has that teamwork mindset, like it's not going to be the worst shift either.
You'll get through it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think, and I'm really just kind of coming back from when I was on the floor. I know that I really appreciated the days that we were fully staffed.
Oh yeah.
It was like, oh wow. But then it was like when the tech was like, "Hey, I'm busy." I'm like, "You know what? I get it."
Yeah.
Like, like okay. Like,
yeah, no problem.
no
It's all right, no
problem.
big deal.
Like,
that happened today. I mean, today we had, if we have 3 techs, technically I think technically our unit, when our unit's full, we qualify for 4 techs, which is, that hasn't happened in years.
Andre say.
Because if we have 4 techs.
That is a unicorn I've yet to see.
Yeah, I was like, if we have 4 techs that are scheduled on the same day, they're pulling them to help cover other units.
Yeah.
So we never have more than 3 on the floor in the last few years. But when we have 3, that means all of our patients are covered by a tech, with as well as obviously our nurses. The day goes by so much easier. And like literally today, I had a LIP reach out to me and said, "Hey, I went to go message the nurse, but they're on Do Not Disturb. I didn't want to bother them if they were on lunch. Do you mind going to recheck a blood pressure?" I was in the charge role. So I was like, no problem, we'll get it done. So I reached out to the tech because the NP didn't know who the tech was. So I was like, I reached out to the tech. I said, "Hey, can you recheck this patient's blood pressure?" And the tech replied back to me. She's like, "I'm on lunch, but I'll do it afterwards." And I said, "Oh, poo, don't worry about it. I'll go down there and get it. No problem." Like, I was like, I just let her have her lunch. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, I can go get it. I have a second. Like, no, MBD. But like, NBD, no big deal. Like, I will go and get that. Like, it's just like, you just appreciate having them when you actually get them. It's just a different vibe for your whole shift. Like, you just less worries, less stress.
Right.
Like, they are the backbone of the hospital, truly. So when you actually have like a fully staffed shift, it's like, oh, amazing.
It's so great.
Yeah. Like the angels are like, ah.
And we talked about this in, actually, I think, was it the first or second episode? It was earlier, but being a CNA before being a nurse, was it the first or second? I really,
we definitely, I was definitely in one of the
before.
2. Yeah, definitely gives you an advantage.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and again, I'm sure like other people would agree that it definitely gives you an advantage of being a CNA. It makes you a better nurse. And you can speak to that because you did that as well.
Yeah, but I mean, I can't tell if I'm a better nurse or not. I can't say that. That would be very conceited of me.
I think it does, though.
Oh no! I mean, I have seen other people, and I do. I think it does make them a better nurse. They're just more aware, and they're easier to delegate things, but they are also easier to be overwhelmed by not delegating things.
True. Yeah, I could see that as well, because they know how it feels to be like, they know how it feels to feel like they've been over delegated. Right. Being like, why don't you lazy nurses do something? Yeah. So then they want to like try and do more than what they probably should.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen it both ways. Yeah. I've also seen a former CNA that's become a nurse be like, "Now you can do all my stuff," and just like be kicking back. And I've been like, okay, that's not, remember how you felt when that was done to you. Like, come on. Redirect.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
It's like, but
I think for the majority, though, I would say yes. It definitely makes a difference, and on the positive side of things.
Yeah.
To come in with that experience before nursing.
Fair.
Does that wrap it up?
I think so.
That wraps it up.
Class dismissed. That's a wrap for today's session of Nursing Life 101. We hope you found some useful takeaways to bring back to the floor. Remember, nursing is a lifelong learning journey, and we're here with you.
If you want to connect, find us on Twitter at Nurse Life 101 or on Facebook at Nursing Life 101. And don't forget to subscribe and share with fellow nurses. Until next time, take care of yourselves, which is what I need to do. Clearly, I have a cold.
100%.
And keep making a difference out there.